Cool. All right. Well, I think we're good to go then. Our agenda, speaking of staying, on our toes and responsive to changes, obviously our agenda is responding to big news this week. And number one on that list is the funding lawsuit settlement. So I would guess everyone here is pretty apprised of of the news. Dwayne, I don't know if you were joining us to give sort of a quick memo on that or not, but if you want to, we'd love to have you just, I don't know, say a couple words.
I'm a fly on the wall.
Are you? Oh, you're being a fly today? Okay. Fair enough. So, of course, what we saw was the state track of the ACLU Class E DO NAACP lawsuit came forward on Monday. I think sooner than maybe some of us would have expected, and with a lot of different components to think about. And so I know that's taken up a lot of time in my week, just having conversations about it, and then even talking through it with colleagues who maybe haven't been paying as close attention to all that's been going on there. So the questions, of course, for us as an education consortium committed to equity is, how do we want to respond? So how do we want to address the lawsuit settlement at next week's meeting? What are we thinking in terms of our messaging around it? Should we make a statement? And so on and so forth. So I can start with, sorry. What was that, Tika?
Sorry, I was unmuting to say something, but I can wait till you're done.
Oh, okay. For our part, Nnamdi and I did put our heads together and made a joint statement, sort of as in our position as, essentially, legislative founders of the consortium, and framed it that way. And that was reposted to the Reading Facebook page. I don't know if we want to pop a link up to that or anything, or if that's even possible. But so we did, and Matt and actually Eugene as well put eyes on that too, because I figured if we were going to share that as particularly on the Reading page, we wanted to make sure that they had opportunity for input. So we do have a joint statement out there. I guess we can talk about whether or not we can consider that to be a statement that we can use as the consortiums, but we didn't, we did that as leadership as opposed to getting the buy-in from all of the members. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Tika, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Yes, no worries. As someone that gave over 3 hours testimony for it, I'm very, very excited. But I will say there is a few circles that I have been chatting in that are also excited, but also now nervous because I guess the way that things came out, that in order for for the K-3 funding and the different pieces of it, that unless we put money back into the system, that money is going to be taken from somewhere. And so their concern is, where is this money going to be taken? And then the inequity that creates, excuse me, in other pieces. So yes, maybe I have a student who is in 2nd grade and now the school gets more funding for their special education services, but maybe now they can't provide transportation because of that funding budget. So that's a real concern of theirs. And then also how it was written that certain things had to be agreed upon or done through the legislation and put into the budget. So that's a big concern of some community folks.
Izzy, if I make a suggestion, and that is that that you share the formal settlement agreement with the members of the consortium so they can read it for themselves, not as it's interpreted by the media. And I'm thinking particularly, it's not that it's going to resolve, Tico, your concern, but it is addressed directly in the formal settlement agreement as to the limits placed on on taking the money from programs that primarily serve disadvantaged students and their families. In any case, I think if they have the actual settlement agreement, they can evaluate it for themselves.
I think that would be helpful for consortium members, but I think maybe if we took that and kind of broke it down into a one-pager for the community folks, because that's, I mean, Karen sent me a copy of things, and so I can look at it, but I know that in my conversations with the community that they have their own interpretation. So having something that they can see also in print, I think would be helpful.
On that, if I can just add, there is a summary that was prepared by the NAACP. And since they were one of the litigants in this, that's their understanding of what was agreed to. That's the one-page summary. Yeah, I think Haley has sent that. I think you have that. But if not, I can get it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, we have the statement, sort of the leadership statement. We have the full decision, which Dwayne just popped in there, which I think is great for people to have if that's something they want to dig into. But yeah, I know there are a couple versions. I thought the ACLU had one as well, like a boiled down one, but it sounds like, did you say the NAACP, Dr. Rich?
Yeah, Freeman sent one around right afterwards.
That might be nice to share those 3 items. The statement, the ACLU's, the full settlement, as well as the NAACP's talking points. Does anyone have a link to that? I don't think I've seen that, or myself actually, or maybe we could just forward it around.
Yeah, I have it. I'll send it to you, Tazeen.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I probably already do. All right, so I think those 3 things would be good to make sure everyone has in advance of next week's meeting. I know, sort of like to Tika's point on some very specific things, I feel like I've had several different, actually consortium members, but as well as members of the public, with some strong feelings about specific components and you know, what needs to be done around them to make sure that they're effective. I think that's good. I guess my concern, not my concern so much as how do we figure out how to address this as a consortium? I think we very much have a role to play in having that conversation and talking those things through. I don't know that I want it to eat our meeting next Thursday because we have a very clear agenda. So I guess I'm thinking in terms of, we obviously want to make time to talk about it. We've had some ideas about where it can fit on the current agenda, and which I'm sure we can make the case for expanding that. But I guess my thought is, do we need to talk about, you know, some other internal structure to create space to have a settlement focused conversation? You know, where do we think we want to steer that in terms of helping the consortium continue to work through it beyond just a 15-minute update, which I think will feel very inadequate when people would probably love to spend an hour talking about it on Thursday. We may not have space for that. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there in terms of how do we address it? How do we, quite frankly, create consortium messaging and even work related to the statement? How do we think that fits best? So Nnamdi, I think your committee already, you met this week after the announcement. So maybe that's right. Do you want to talk to how you guys spoke to it? Nope, unmute.
It was definitely a major part of our planning meeting this week. We just spoke about how we believe that it touches our work, but also how it fuels our work. It gives us a greater charge, mainly in the direction of looking at where we had come from, meaning our stance on governance, where we were, is that many of the inequities we felt were, the settlement shows a lot of areas, a lot of gaps, and we feel that our work that we've done so far, looking at referendum reform, really addresses some of those gaps that are not addressed inside of the settlement. So it clearly shows our work to go forward, as well as the point on governance, that our governance piece is an issue that isn't mentioned in the settlement. So it clearly just shows our path forward for our subgroup.
Mm-hmm. So there's certainly space in that working group to do settlement related work or recommendations. Perhaps there's room in all of them, or, you know, as as desired in each working group. So maybe that's the way we sort of chunk it out in terms of how we want to come up with our statements or our plans. How we intend to come up with recommendations around it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Dawn, kind of speaking to that point as a member of the social determinants community, or I know you want to speak with your early childhood hat on, but feel free.
So sure, I definitely want to make sure that to speak with the subcommittee regarding a lot of the feedback within the early childhood community. So the governor had previously committed to $5 million for ECAP. Well, ECAP needs to be strengthened. So there's a lot looking the details of ECAP, because ECAP follows the federal Head Start performance standards. And several years ago, the federal government really strengthened those and then pulled back. So a lot of the things that people were hoping and expecting to see regarding the quality of educators in Head Start, as well as a longer day and a longer school year. So what the feds put out, they pulled back. And because ECAP follows what the federal government is doing, we still see ECAP as a program that has great potential, but how it's implemented throughout the state, many people with ECAP grants still run a 3.5-hour a day program without before and after care. Not all of the educators hold teacher certification, and on and on. So there are concerns with the commitment of simply doubling the ECAP investment, because what we're doing with ECAP right now in the state is insufficient. We haven't strengthened what we're currently doing. So doubling something that's not considered to be as strong as it could be is concerning. There's also, because the governor had said he would commit $5 million over the next 2 years, to then say, well, we'll commit $6 million over the next 4 years. So that's less money. And if we look at, like right now, we're number 41 in the country. We only serve 4% of our preschoolers in Delaware. And so doubling it would only bring us to 8%, which would make us number 33 in the country. So we just know on the ground. So on the ground, the response from people who serve ECAP is, we have waiting lists. We have lots and lots and lots of children and families who are eligible, but they can't get in because there's not enough funding. So we were really hoping for more of a universal preschool commitment. And so we know where we need to continue to advocate. And so I would hope that, we'll certainly speak with our subcommittee, but the commitment to double ECAP, we need to commit to making ECAP the strong program that we know it can and should be. So families are not put in a situation where they get 3.5 hours of programming and then they have, where do they go after that? The quality of the kinds of services associated with ECAP and the education provided, and then doubling it is just not enough. So in the early childhood world, there's a lot of conversation related to the settlement. And I'll share that with our subgroup when we meet. Thank you.
Just as a point, Don, there's nothing to prevent the General Assembly, if it so disposed or had the resources, to increase the level much beyond what's in the settlement.
That's the hope.
Sorry, I'm having a delivery, of course, and my dog's going crazy. No, that is really helpful. And then I don't know that if we have anyone from educators here, but what I had heard from some consortium members was a response to the $4 million, that's sort of built in to talk about recruitment and retention, and some specific ideas about, well, that could be, that could be a real boon, or that could kind of be, we should really have some strong recommendations there. And I think that committee already has some, so perhaps that's, I think there's space for each of the working groups to look at aspects of the settlement that obviously fit under their purview, and maybe craft that response with the, the stakeholders we brought together for that working group for that reason. So perhaps that's the way for us to encourage the deeper conversation on the settlement, and reviewing, where we stand and what we would like to see, as opposed to in the full body meeting during October. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I mean, to sort of blend it into, oh, thank you, Dawn. To sort of blend it into just talking about the agenda, I think we certainly want to spend 15 minutes seems a little inadequate to me because I feel like folks are going to have some basic questions. I think we want to limit it, but I don't think we want to remove that. Matt, did you unmute?
I did.
Okay, go for it.
I was just going to add, you know, we're going to have Jay Street at the meeting.
Yes.
And I think he's already said publicly that, you know, it's a settlement and it doesn't cover everything that even, you know, the plaintiffs wanted it to. And, you know, Jay is pretty candid. And I think if he's just squarely, and I already asked him when I invited him to the meeting, you know, to be prepared to talk about, you know, what he thinks that the settlement does achieve and what he thinks are the important things that it doesn't. So I think, you know, just hearing from him will be helpful in terms of, you know, what remains to be done. And I could be wrong, but I thought that I don't think that the suit itself ever really was covering early childhood. You know, so, you know,
No,
the fact that they were able to get,
surprising.
yeah, so that was really sort of, I mean, it's great that, you know, part of the settlement adds to it. But, you know, I mean, I agree with what Dawn said that, you know, the dollar amounts are, you know, even what the social determinants working group has started to focus in on is what we would be looking for in the short term. I think that, you know, we're looking at, you know, asking for much larger investments. So I think it's great to acknowledge that, you know, with that facet of it, that, you know, they were able to get something that hadn't even been part of the suit initially, which is fantastic. But there's, you know, again, to Dawn's point, you know, we were pretty far down to start with, so there's an awful lot of room to move up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was kind of it was sort of a bonus, but I mean, it's a bonus we can draw from and build off of in the recommendations that we make. Okay, so I think where we have been leaning is that we didn't end up with anything set from the Office of Equity and Innovation anyway. So that line of the agenda is going to be swapped for Jay Street to give a, you know, just sort of give us the lowdown. And I think we want to provide some time for questions. Any thoughts on whether or not we should expand that from the allotted 15 minutes that we already have set for that portion of the agenda? Or do we want to just limit it and say, and charge folks to, in their upcoming work groups, you know, dig in? Or do we, you know, want to give people a little bit more time to ask questions? What do you guys think?
I would be very surprised if it could be handled in 15 minutes with Jay's presentation and questions.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Rich. I think we may want to open it up a bit, and then that will give us maybe a sense of just clarity about how it's going to touch each one of our subcommittees.
And would it make sense to switch and have the funding work group right after that, so that you can kind of transition into how that would could affect the funding and governance work group? Then we can go into educators and social determinants. I'm just kind of thinking of the flow.
I mean, from my perspective, that would be fine.
Sure.
Okay.
So what do we think? Do we, Haley, this one doesn't have the times chunked out, so I'm trying to think what impact would it have? I mean, I think we can still try to tightly manage this time, but do we think like 30 minutes? And what impact would that have on our report outs if we give us 30 minutes to talk about settlement?
Yeah, let's see. I think we allotted, it's like 75 minutes in total for that work group report out. So that would give us, let's see. I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay. So we'll look at putting 30 minutes for that. And then it might just, I mean, if folks are really, which I wouldn't be surprised, drawn to the talk of the settlement, I mean, we may not have as many questions on our work group memos and work, and you know, people might just sort of continue to pull back to the settlement. I wouldn't be shocked. But of course, it is extremely important that we air those out in the meeting. You know, that's something we've all been working towards for a while. But so I would propose 30 minutes for settlement presentation and discussion, and we'll try our best to stick to that, and then flow into our work group report outs with, you know, their goals for action. And then I'm sure the review of high-level consortium goals will be a very quick, you know, we'll just be revisiting the high points that have just come out of the work group report outs, as well as the ones that apply to the entire consortium.
Would it make sense to move that discussion to flip-flop 1 and 2? So we'll have like our normal flow of our consortium meetings and then the settlement discussion at the end instead of first?
So that we can kind of go on with it rather than interrupting it.
Correct.
I mean,
I kind of like that better,
mhm.
but like we can tell everyone it's going to be on the top of everyone's mind that we're going to get to it, but we want to do the work group report outs and have, you know, good feedback where people are kind of focused on that, and then let the conversation flow about the settlement.
Right, and that way, if we get to a situation where people want to hang on and ask more questions, we're able to do that. That's their choice, and they can hang on, right? Sorry, Tika.
Yeah, no worries. And then also too, some of the things that were given in the report out may tie into the settlement and create questions together for folks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense, a lot of sense. We had swapped it because we were looking at it as kind of like a very finite thing from Jim, you know, before we went into where we thought our conversation was going to linger, and now that's changed. So oops, sorry. I like that suggestion.
So do you think the settlement conversation would come, like, would we do the work group report out, then review high level goals, and then the settlement?
I think so.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's see. So I've got that out. And I know you posted the pretty version of the statement. I think we just want to make sure that we might need to edit that a little bit. I think it should be, let me see. Not attributed to just me, because it's definitely a joint commentary that Namdi and I both made. So, I mean, we can talk about that. And then do folks feel that that's appropriate to use as the consortium's messaging? Should we look at doing something, you know, else? I mean, I haven't heard anything from any consortium members in terms of objecting to that statement, but quite the opposite. But what do you think? Okay. I guess we can see what flows from the conversation next week if we feel like we need to do anything moderated or beyond that. I personally don't think we do.
Mm-hmm. And we can see what they say and just kind of keep a list of questions, comments, concerns, and ways the consortium might be able to help or be part of it as we move it forward as well, as it moves forward.
Might be helpful at some point for you and Namdi to communicate to the members consortium the prospective timelines with regard to the legislation. Because I think people might not recognize how some of this might.
Say that again. I couldn't fade it out.
What the timelines would be for carrying out, acting upon the proposals, however they're acted upon by the General Assembly. Because as you think about it, right, there's going to be a lot of time to chime in on this moving forward, right? And it's going to be, and particularly the portions of it that are part of the general budget.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think
So
that might
when-
be helpful to clarify to everyone about the timeline so they can think through what the strategy might be with regard to the consortium's role.
When Jay Street talks about the settlement, do you think, is it just going to be him or Tizzy and Matt or Tizzy and Namdi? Are you going to also like, add some commentary, like sort of what Dan is saying to like add, a consortium just viewpoint on it a bit?
I mean, I think we can and should speak openly to it. I think to Dan's point, it might be helpful if we think this is realistic to take maybe some of the documents that really have boiled it down. Do you think it might be possible for us to, because I'm thinking we're going to be in a Zoom room, people are going to be sitting there looking at this, hearing Jay. It might be helpful for us to have a visual that does those things that Dan is saying. So like that shows the bullet points of the components with the timelines associated with them. I know when we were on a call yesterday with Karen, and it was really helpful. I just sort of navigated over to the ACLU's website, and I think the dates by which things had to be implemented were very clear on the website. And it was very simple language in terms of what the components were. So I'm wondering if it, besides I think I'll certainly be able to speak extemporaneously towards it. And I know, Namdi and Matt will. But I think might be helpful just to have a visual. So while he's talking about it, people can sort of see that language.
Do we know if the ACLU and Mr. Morris and others who were on that call yesterday, if they plan to join them? Because I thought that was a very well-rounded and supported presentation with Dr. Freeman and everyone else that helped support what Jay was saying and really added on and made it a very complete presentation yesterday.
I agree. I think we should invite them.
Okay.
So it was the ACLU team, the NAACP team. Jay obviously represents DO. Well, and Community Legal Aid Society, which Rich Morse represents. I thought that was helpful. And then I'm sure we will have at the meeting, as we always do, the secretary, I would think John Sheehan would be there as well. We might want to double check. Since obviously the governor's office has a part to play in this as well.
Can I just make one of this, Jerome?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to bring up that on this process and timing that Dan mentioned, there are governor's OMB budget hearings in November for the 22 fiscal year. So I don't know if you want to avail yourselves of that, but you can potentially provide testimony before the governor's budget is prepared, in those hearings that'll occur very soon.
Yeah.
So it's not just the legislative process. There is a process now to maybe reinforce some of the things that you hope the governor will go along with and all that kind of stuff. So I just want to throw that out. Some people kind of miss the opportunity for the OMB governor's budget hearings.
Right. Yeah, Matt and I did speak to, the governor's team about some of our expectations of what we thought would come out of some of our work group recommendations in advance. But of course, this, I don't know that it alters it. I think it sort of fits together with it in some ways. But I think that's good. That's excellent guidance for us to be thinking about in terms of the timing of how our work groups might respond.
Hey, Tizzy.
Yes.
Who is going to be the person that reaches out and invites the ACLU team and the NAACP and the Legal Aid Society? I don't know. I can find people's emails, but I don't know.
Dwayne can do the.
Oh, Dwayne, yeah, Dwayne's on.
Sure, I can do it. Yeah, but on that point, I just want to clarify, it's also a joint settlement agreement. So if we're going to invite the plaintiffs, it might make sense to also invite someone from the governor's office who'd be willing to present. Yep. I don't want this, it should not feel like this is Jay's plan or Dio's plan or NAACP's plan.
Right, it's a settlement.
Joint settlement agreement between both parties. And so this isn't like our proposal or silver bullet of fixing equity in Delaware. So I don't want it to appear as such at the Reading Consortium meeting next Thursday. So happy to reach out to the folks on my team, but I think it makes sense to have it be perhaps a joint presentation or at least some collaboration there.
Yeah, and I think John Sheehan would be the one to start with. If he thinks there's someone else who needs to be there, and he's usually there anyway, but I think, and then I think it's just a matter of, I guess we can kind of defer to the two sides, how they want to present it. I don't know that we want to have like a panel of 8 people all feeling that, they need to speak. If we have 10 to 15 minutes to present it and we have everyone there kind of as a resource, particularly when there are questions, I think that would be good. But maybe if, 2 of them can kind of lay it out for us and then we go from there. That's kind of how it worked yesterday. I thought that worked really nicely.
So should I reach out to John Sheen and ask him if he's comfortable speaking sort of alongside or after J Street at the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I would just let him know that we want to make sure that the governor's office is represented, and if that would be him, great. Or if he feels that there's someone else who should do that.
Mike Jackson also a member of the consortium, so he's
he has a designee, but
actually, that reminds me. Mary Nash actually emailed me and said she couldn't. She's the designee for Mike Jackson, and she can't make the meeting.
Okay, let's see if we can get him.
Yeah, that's what I was.
That would be good. That would be good.
Mm-hmm.
One other comment, if I might, because I think that in the context of the timeline, another role for the consortium would be simply monitoring the progress of the implementation and communicating that back not only to the consortium, but to the wider community.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great point. I put that in the chat, so I'm really glad to hear that.
Right. I would love for us to come away from next week's meeting. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's definitely something that's been heavy on my mind is sort of, so where does Reading fit? And it's a big conversation that we have to have. But I think it's important that we do touch on that. So not only are we talking about the settlement and getting some questions answered, but it's like, what is Reading's role going to be moving forward on this? And so I think we need to be able to pose the question to the consortium, at least for them to chew on. Certainly, I think Matt and Nnamdi and and Eugene and I we could just make a statement on how we feel we should be. I mean, I don't think we necessarily have to make it a question as much as, I think we should pose the question for folks to consider, but I think we should make it clear how we envision our role moving forward. Maybe we can, start with that even when we transition to that conversation.
That's a lot for half an hour.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it needs to be a discussion. I think we should, if we're going to be saying what we think of this settlement, I think you can kind of marry that with and the role we anticipate to have. I don't know. I don't think we need to have a 30-minute conversation about what it means to be a monitoring body. I think that comes subsequently. Feel free to push back on that, Matt.
No pushback.
Okay.
Do you think it would make sense to have like a separate, like hour-long session for just that discussion? I know that's sort of what you started out saying, and then we thought maybe in the work groups could all deal with it separately, but then it might get to, each work group could handle it differently. Not that that's a bad thing, but just, like, I don't know, maybe more of a structured conversation about this topic in particular. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Maybe having that separate conversation so that everybody can weigh in.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to schedule something separately? Do we want to dedicate a planning meeting time slot to that conversation? I don't know that would work for all of our stakeholders, particularly the ones that are educators. But what do you guys think? Schedule something specially to have a conversation about Reading and the settlement?
I think so. I don't think we can do it during this like you said, because we can't get all the stakeholders at this time right now.
Do we want to have a date picked before we start this conversation next week so that when we're telling people they need to stop talking so we can move on? Well, I mean, we're kind of not doing that, but that we can say, and in 2 weeks, we're having a special session dedicated to our role, you know, envisioning our role. Okay. Because I know we have at least 2 work group meetings the following week, so I don't know that we're going to be able to fit in an hour or 2 for a special session. I don't know that people will be thrilled about that, but maybe the week after that.
And I know for the funding work group, we talked about having representatives from our stakeholder partners and the CFOs. And Jill has agreed to join our Tuesday meeting that following week to just be able to begin that conversation. So it may be a path that, I guess the first step may be having that conversation within the subgroups and then having a full group meeting.
Oh, okay. Speaking of that, and so this kind of gets us to the work group updates part of our agenda. I know that funding and governance is meeting on the 28th. Social determinants is meeting on the 29th, right? And educators meeting is, no,
No, we're not meeting on the 28th.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
okay. When are the next work group meetings for each of the groups? Currently
The social determinants one is the 29th. The funding and governance is November 5th.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not sure about educators.
November 12th.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then, I guess to that point, do we want to look at after the 12th for a special session? Will that feel like too far away, or would that just, you know, basically we'll be adding a November meeting? We could do it at our usual time. Oh, wait, no, that's probably Thanksgiving. But we could, you know, do it that prior week. Does that feel like we're pushing it off too far? Or if we make it really clear, I guess, that the timeline is not, you know, a tomorrow timeline, perhaps people would be amenable to that.
Well, I almost wonder too if it gets lost in the shuffle of the election, holidays, and all the other things if we push it too far out.
Push it too far out.
And just thinking of like my work group, I feel like at their November meeting, they're going to be trying to really
Finalize.
finalize everything so that it's done. I don't know.
So then maybe, do we want to then flip the idea and do it before all of our work group meetings start meeting? Which would mean, hold on, the meeting I imagine on the 28th that doesn't exist. I'm looking. You know, we can pick one of those evenings that's not the 29th, so we don't step on the toes of social determinants, or do it after social determinants. I have some time to play with that week. And then of course it gives us, that way we can say next week we're having a special session if we can pull together a date that works for enough people. I don't know that
I like the idea. I'm just worried about how, I know I was the one that brought it up, but about how it's actually gonna happen. Because I want it to be good if it happens. You know, you want good facilitated conversation, but
true. Well, we have about a 2-week window there to I think do it if we want to feel like we're beating the holiday distraction.
right.
Election day's out. But again, the election day week, maybe, you know, kind of a wash. I don't know. I think my instinct is to try to get it done the week after next week's meeting. I guess in terms of what it needs to look like facilitation wise, I haven't thought through yet because it's a new idea. I haven't really envisioned what that would look like. I'm like, no, it'll be an open conversation. It'll be, you know, Matt and Nnamdi and Eugene and I say Nnamdi and Eugene in particular because obviously they're funding and governance co-chairs, you know, laying out what we think this should look like, and, you know, getting folks response to that. In terms of how to facilitate that, yeah, I'd have to give that some more thought. But I mean, if we're talking about just having an hour sort of of us presenting our ideas and hearing from folks, maybe it doesn't have to be too overcomplicated, but just get it done. I don't know, you know, sort of a kind of an internal meeting, which would obviously be public, as all of our meetings are, but not a grand presentation like a normal full consortium meeting, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Well, I don't think you need a lot more up front if you do just what you said, Fizzy, if you and Namdi, Eugene, Pat, open it up, maybe refresh people on using the material you're using for the meeting next week, at least the slide that you're preparing. And then I think that the conversation is likely to take it from there.
Okay.
The only question I would have is whether you want any other resource people. You can just think about that.
Any other reason?
Resource people, again, you might want to invite
Right.
folks who participated from ACLU and others, just because, in the governor's office, just because, to make sure that the what's communicated is accurate with regard to the details.
And again, well, right, yeah, I guess that's true. If we think it's going to end up being, I guess in my mind, I was going more to let's have a dedicated conversation about Reading's role, whether it is a monitoring
And that's
body,
fine.
as
You don't need
opposed
that.
to, you know, sort of a digging into the actual substance of the case. But, you know, if we think that I don't know that we would get like a big turnout for that, but I guess we'll have to kind of see what, you know, how it gets, how truncated the conversation feels next week. I think since we've reorganized the agenda and are kind of leaving it on the end, I would hope that that means that we have everybody there. And if folks want to keep the conversation going, we kind of have some leeway to do that and get that done. And then the following week, it's really more that internal, all right, you know, as Reading, here's where we foresee ourselves managing this moving forward. As opposed to doing that whole revisiting of it again. That would be my position on it. But I think we should just hold a day, and then we can hold a time, expect it to be a fairly simple meeting talking about our role. And if we feel the need to evolve that, we can do that. So what, do we want to pick a day now, or do we want to do that by email amongst ourselves?
Now is probably easier if everyone's sort of on.
I agree.
I know I said we could do it after social determinants, but I think that's totally unfair to the people on social determinants. So I would say not the 29th. I think that kind of leaves us with Tuesday or Wednesday. And at this point, I can actually be kind of flexible on those 2 days for an hour or two after 5.
I'm available for either.
Does anybody have a blackout date for either?
No, either's good for me as well.
Great. Eugene, are you with us? I would love for you to be free there. And I know we just lost Matt. I'll text him.
Do we think it'd be like a 5 to 6 time frame? Yeah, something like
I think
that.
so.
Can you repeat the date again, please?
October 27th or October 28th.
Okay. I mean, if we are picking, I really don't have a preference. If anyone has a strong preference, let it be known. I'm really fine with whichever one is more convenient for the team. All right, so we can just arbitrarily pick then. Why don't we just go, how about the 28th to give us an extra day?
Sure. That sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, so the 28th at 5 o'clock. Great. Okay. All right. So I have about 10 minutes before I have to hop. So do we need to do any further work group updates? I know we got the dates for the upcoming meetings, so kind of staggered across those 3 weeks.
I had a question for social determinants, but I don't know if anyone's on that could answer it. Each group has their was that frozen?
Just for a second.
Okay. Because all of you were frozen, so it means I was frozen. But the social determinants, each of their 3 sort of subgroups have their draft 1-pagers, and I just wanted to know if they were ready to just put on the website or share a little bit more broadly so people just knew what that work group was up to. With big draft watermarks on them and stuff, nothing finalized, but I was just wondering, I feel like it'd be helpful. But Jason did, in his memo that he sent out, he linked to all of them. So everyone who got the memo should be able to click and see them anyway.
Yeah.
So they are shared widely, but I thought it could be nice to just have the drafts on our website. So I was just wondering, I didn't want to put them up and shock people that they were up there, But
Jason?
So I think it's fine, but I don't own the content. I see Dawn is unmuted, and Dawn has been kind of the primary author on one of them. So what do you think, Dawn?
Once we put it out there during a meeting, I figured that it was out there. So I'm certainly happy to have it shared with draft on it, because we are, and Tika's on the call too. So we are working on finalizing recommendations, but what you shared in the last email certainly can be posted for people to review.
okay, great. Thank you.
And I know that I could ask Roger, Dr. Harrison, if he did that 1-pager. I could text him now to see if he's comfortable sharing that. I think it's probably yes, because it was pretty comprehensive, squeezed into 1 page. But I'll check with him if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great.
There were also 2 things I proposed last week if you want me to give an update on as well.
I feel like I have them. Yeah. This agenda is really long.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Any other updates from other groups? I see another question for educators. Work group.
We're going to take that question off because they'll share at the meeting where the implementation plan is, but they're also working on just confirming that all the definitions of different terms are where they want them to be. And we're bringing Monique, I always want to say Monica.
Yeah.
Monique, we're going to try to meet with Monique to work through that as well.
Oh, great. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. I think we got our funding and governance update. Okay. So let's see. Tika, was there something, let's see, on public engagement? We don't have town halls scheduled yet, but I know Tika, you were kind of taking some thought leadership on that. And we have several other ideas. I don't know if you're free to speak to them or not, but.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So last week when I was discussing outreach and almost kind of like a communication plan on educating the community and having them involved along the way of the process versus just disseminating information and having them involved, but really kind of that education piece of that and having a street team. So I have reached out to some other folks that are organizers as well to assist and kind of creating some tools that we could use. And so I've worked on drafting some things. And so for next meeting, if you want, I can put some things together to then share before we get started or roll out or wherever we want to go from here, but to see what other people think about the outreach portion. And then with the listserv, I have been in contact with our ED, and so we can add a blurb if we want to decide what if we have a specific message we want to put out reoccurring, or just sort of some little updates like we've been doing here. And then the other thing that I had brought up last week was tying us into folks with the Kerwin Commission and hearing from them, which I was able to do and get a meeting set up with as well.
Awesome. That's great. I'm excited about that. So we have that meeting next Friday.
We do. And I don't know if you saw the message this morning, but I had asked if there was any specific questions. Haley said maybe at the end of this we could do that. But if there's any, and actually it could be done through email as well.
Yeah.
But if there's any specific questions that we want them to ask, if we could get them to them ahead of time, they'll be better prepared to answer them.
Okay. Oh, that's helpful.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I think we can continue to work on these. I have a meeting with Representative Dorsey Walker on Monday about synergy between Reading and her African American Task Force Subcommittee on Economic Empowerment and Development. And I did review the public response document finally. I think you got my email. It looks good to go. I just figured, you know, if we take that spreadsheet and make it a PDF and pop it up there, I think that would be great. And I think if we don't have a response on one of the things, I think we should just say response pending, so folks know that we did reach out and are waiting for that response.
Yep.
Looks good. Thank you. I think we can, I think on the other side of our full consortium meeting next week, we can maybe start to turn ourselves to thinking about what town halls might look like if we feel like we need to hold those listening sessions and how. And I know that Tiga will have more thoughts on that too, it sounds like. So. Okay, anything else? It's a long agenda, but I think we kind of did it. I don't know that we need to start talking about next year's policy focus areas today. So,
yeah, that's what's on there to remind us to eventually do that.
I think our policy focus area for January 2021 may have just been given to us, so we'll see. But we'll know more through next week. And with that said, do we have any public commenters with us today? Couldn't see. If anyone does, just let us know in the. No, I don't think so. I think I see. Technically, Dwayne would be the public today, and you've already spoken. So. All right, cool. I think we're good. All right, right on time. All right, thank you, everybody. Exciting times to be with you guys as always, and we have a lot to do all the time now. So I'm looking forward to next week and beyond. It is a lot, but I'm glad we're here and ready to take it on. All right, enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.